spilled?
I did.
Yeah.
Hi. I have something to start, unless you do.
Go. Tell me something.
So I went to take a shower.
Oh, nice.
It was good.
Wash behind your ears.
I did.
Good.
Water pressure was good.
Good.
Good heat. Sometimes the showers here, like, the water temperature is questionable.
Yep.
But I read something that was on the board in there.
Okay. On
the like, so in the room they
drill
have
board?
They have like the coach's board on the wall that like any coach can use when they're there. So there must have been a game here. Well, there was a game here last night, and so the coach wrote on the board the word compete.
Yeah.
Which fine, and then underneath it wrote, "You don't get what you no." He wrote, "You get what you earn, not what you deserve." So, like, do you know what that means? Like, what would you say that means? You get what you earn, not what you deserve.
You asking me
I'm
what?
asking you. I have a point, but just give me your
you
off
get
the top
what
of your
you
head
earn,
thoughts. You get what you earn, not
not
what you deserve.
Not what you deserve. Okay, so if I would say that means like just because you're a good team doesn't mean you just get to win. You have to still earn your victories.
Okay. Fair enough.
You don't get. You don't. Like you can flip that though, right? You could deserve. You could earn your ice. You could. I don't know. Like
Okay,
you can
here we
still.
go.
Yeah.
This is my point.
Yeah,
Okay.
you
So
can
I
flip
did the
that.
same thing.
Yeah,
I
you
read
can
it
flip
and
that.
I was like, okay, on the one hand it can mean this, on another hand it can mean this. It doesn't really make clear sense what this
Right.
means.
Yeah.
So my point to bringing this up is I'm an adult. You're an adult.
I was just
and
gonna say
I'm
these
reading
kids
this.
are 12.
Yeah, and I'm reading this going like, I don't really get what that means. So I doubt. I mean, I'm sure in the moment when he wrote it down, whoever this coach was that was in there, said, okay, this is what this means and explained it. And maybe it made sense the way he explained it. But this is why I think it's very important to be very careful with the words that you pick and precise with just anyone, but as a coach especially, when you're trying to communicate a message. This is why we get so hung up on words, right? A lot of times when people listen to the podcast, they'll hear us, we'll say a word and point it out because like it's a big word or it's funny. Or if it's like the exact word we needed, we'll be like, oh, like good word or like whatever, right? And it's like kind of funny. But to put a serious note on it, it's actually important because if you can't say exactly what you mean, then things get confusing, right? So if you don't use the right word to explain your message, especially if you're a kid, it's hard to know what you're talking about because it can turn out to be ambiguous, as we say, right? So one kid that kind of half listened to the coach's explanation could read it after and be like, well, does that mean this or does that mean that or whatever? So like for the coach, obviously he's trying to send a good message, a message of some sort that's good. I'm sure behind that there's something good about it. But when you're a coach, you have to be careful with how you say things because it can turn out to be confusing. So if you don't have the right vocabulary, like this is why it's so important that you read books, man, because you start to figure out what words to use to explain what you're thinking. And that just helps your communication when you're a coach, you know? So if you can explain exactly what you mean because you know you can pull the right words out of your head to say, then that's really helpful when you're trying to communicate a message to anyone. It doesn't just have to be your players. It could be at work. It could be if you're the boss, if you're leading a meeting, whatever. If you can't say exactly what you're trying to say because you don't have the right words, then it can cause confusion, you know? So I had a moment I'm reading it on the board and thinking like, okay, you're trying to do a good thing, but this could actually be confusing. As you said, like when I ask you, it's like, it could be mean this or this. It's hard to know. So I wanted to throw that out there to coaches.
What was it? You get what you earn, not what you deserve.
You get what you earn, not what you deserve.
Yeah.
So it's like if you earn it, do you not deserve it? So like I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, that's what I mean.
So it's like it can be confusing, and like I said, I'm sure once he wrote it down and maybe explained it, maybe the explanation helped to clarify.
Yeah, because you could be talking about something specific.
Yeah, right. But point being, if you're going to use like a slogan type thing like that, where it's just like buzzwords and a quick little catchphrase that kids remember, then it's like you have to make sure it's clear what you mean.
Yeah, you don't want to read it and say, I suck and blow at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. Like, what am I supposed to do here?
Exactly, right? So I wanted to throw that out there because it's important. It's an important thing. This is why like we talk about, you know, you reading books or if people listen to this and they like the way we explain things, that's a lot of the reason why we're able to do that. It's because we can pull the words out of our head that actually make sense so that it's clear what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, then it can be confusing when people are trying to listen to whatever the messages you're trying to give, right? So I want to throw that out there for the coaches.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. That's good. Like what I like about that too is like you're like me, is I'm always looking for things. So like the smallest little thing that you walk by, if you're unaware and you just go take your shower and you're just trotting along in life, you never see that message, right? So being like kind of self-aware and wanting to learn things and pick things up, and you got your radar on all the time. You see that slogan and you read it, and you could have just read it and said, okay, coach wrote that last night, but then you sat there and you said, okay, what does that actually mean? And I do that a lot myself. You know, I listen to interviews and stuff, like interviews, and when I hear it, I go, wow, you didn't really put a sentence together. Or what are you actually saying? You're not saying much.
Yeah, saying a bunch of nothing.
You're not saying much. You're not saying anything at all.
Yeah. Oh, actually, on that note too, just before we move on, figured out that if you guys that listen all the time, because a lot of you guys listen, and if you leave a review for the podcast, that's actually really helpful. So on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can give it like a 5-star or like write a review or something like that. So if you guys, it doesn't cost you anything to do that. So if you take like 5 seconds and do that, that's actually helpful for us. So there's another thing that's helpful in addition to like the membership stuff. So if you feel like doing that, feel free, because that's actually helpful. So yeah.
Did you know about this before and just never said it? Or
I did know about it before. I just didn't really think about it. And it's also hard. Like, I don't like the sales pitch shit.
I was just gonna say, like, that's my thing.
I know.
Like to subscribe. Just
I know.
Do it if you want. Who cares? Like,
I know.
That's not why we're doing this.
I know. Like that's the thing. Like the balance of like.
But it does help.
It does help. Like, so it's good to mention, but it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want it to come off like I'm asked, like, because if you don't do it, it's fine. Like, I'm not mad at you.
Yeah.
We're still gonna keep putting out the podcast.
We didn't do it for likes.
I know. Okay, so trade deadline was yesterday.
Well, it was for certain places.
For certain places.
The Canadian Hockey League, it's been ramping up for like the last couple months. And yesterday, is culmination the proper word? Not really.
Depends on how you're using it.
Yeah, I know.
How are you using it?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
We'll just call it the culmination of the trade deadline. No, it's yesterday for the CHL, the Canadian Hockey League, was trade deadline, just like they have in the NHL. So for our American listeners that aren't really familiar with the CHL, the Canadian Hockey League, OHL, WHL, QHL. That's what that is. And also for the people in Europe that aren't really familiar with it, we have a trade deadline or the Canadian Junior Hockey League has the trade deadline, just like the National Hockey League does, just a month earlier. So yeah, there was a ton of trades. And to keep it relevant to because here's the thing. A lot of the times there's not a competition, but there's a comparison many times in the hockey world. Canadian junior hockey, like CHL, versus or versus?
I don't know.
Versus? Whatever.
I think it's versus.
Again, it doesn't matter.
Kind of.
It does though. Versus NCAA.
Yeah.
And what you get is sometimes people have really strong opinions, and I understand. Especially if you're a Canadian kid that is a big fan of American NCAA hockey and vice versa, right? So, anyways, so to be clear, the NCAA has their version of a trade deadline, and that's called in 2018 they started the transfer portal. I'm not real familiar with it, but I've heard the term, and I've had a couple of my players use the transfer portal. So the trade deadline. And the reason I'm saying that is because I know that there'll be people, maybe parents or people that listen to a clip of this and say, why do they take 17 to 20-year-old kids and just trade them around like that? And they make it a real negative thing. And that'll be someone like from the state, like from the States, that is a college lover, where you do have your own thing. It's called the transfer portal. So like it's the same thing. That's what I'm saying. So that's a comparable thing.
Is there a deadline on like the transfer process? Like
yeah,
you have to do it by a certain date and stuff like that?
I believe, like I said, I'm not all NCAA.
Because I know we've had a couple guys do it.
Yeah.
But
So
I
I
just don't know
think
if there's
there's a
deadlines associated with it.
well, it's I think it's incumbent.
Holy, what are these words right now? Unbelievable.
Yeah, I read them. I've been reading a book. Incumbent on the player, I believe. I think it's the player's decision to do that.
Yeah, it definitely is that.
Yeah. So there's a period of time where you can put your name in the transfer portal. I just read it yesterday or today, and then I think when you put your name in the transfer portal, then your name goes in. It makes your team aware. So if I play for Michigan State, it goes into the coaches and the athletic directors or whatever know that you are looking at transfer. They can look at it and either talk you through it or agree to it. Whatever it is, that's what it is. So and then the other side of the NCAA. So just to not beat up on I'm not beating them up. I'm just saying just to make it a fair argument
Is
here.
it comparable? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just because I know people will sit there. Well, they shouldn't be trading 17-year-old kids anywhere, and we're going to go through that. I've seen several, and this is not to beat them up, but I've seen several players that I've coached get not letters of intent, but commitments, and then those commitments have been taken away. So that's a different form of like you could say you got a college scholarship, and when they compare it to the Ontario Hockey League or whatever, they make it like a lot of the times they make it sound like it's better because it's school and all that. But there's a lot of comparables. It's just done in different ways, different terms. And what's acceptable here in Canada, because we're used to it and we've lived our life that way, might be different from the States. And it doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it worse. It's just the way they do things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
The bottom line is that you're playing at the highest level that you possibly can as an amateur. And there's it's a competition, so like make no difference. The Windsor Spitfires of Guelph Storm and the Hamilton Bulldogs want to win championships as much as the Michigan State, Notre Dame, and Boston College do, and they do whatever they can to win. At the end of the day, it's a business. So if when people forget about that, then it's not just a game at that point.
It's very the same kind of dynamics. Like there's day-to-day things that are different, but the processes are basically the same.
Yeah.
Like from the recruiting process to the signing your commitment or card process to you're guaranteed this versus that process. Like there's a ton of parallels between the school route versus the CHL route.
Yeah.
And so it's not that different.
And if you're not producing in either one of those leagues, then they tend to want to get rid of you, right? Just like a pro.
Yeah, guys running the OHL is a little bit more, because of the way the trade thing is set up, it's a little bit more, I'd say it's a little bit easier for those transfers to happen just because of the way it's set up. It seems like more of a process in the NCAA, right?
Yeah, it does,
like
for sure.
OHL, like things can happen quick, like in one day. It could be like all of a sudden you're from here and you're going here. Whereas NCAA, it's not really like that. Like I think if you transfer, I don't know if you have to redshirt a year if you transfer. You have to sit a year?
I think that was
that used to be what it is, right?
I think it changed in 2018.
Yeah, because I mean, even in
just before COVID.
Yeah, because even for U Sports, like playing at the CIS, if you transferred school to school, unless you had graduated, so if you do like a 4-year degree, you can't transfer and play right away unless you went to do a master's after your 4-year degree. So you can have kids that do their undergrad at whatever school, and then they go somewhere else to do their master's. They can hop right in and play. But if you try to transfer within those 4 years of your undergrad, then I don't think you can. Or if you come back from pro and want to play Canadian college, you have to sit for a year before you do that. I don't know if that's still a rule. I'm sure it is. But there's a lot of different things that are like that. But it's all trying to accomplish very similar goals at whatever the level is that you're working with, right? So
yeah. So anyways, that was a long way to get to this, but so over the last couple months, like so in Ontario, you saw some teams starting to make moves early. Like North Bay was making moves early because they had a pretty powerful team and they started plucking players. So the trade deadline to them wasn't such a dramatic change. Right. Like they kind of had a pretty good idea what their team was going to be. And you saw a couple teams do it that way. And then, but the last couple weeks have been big time. So like, and the trades were like, wow, like draft picks. Like Saginaw yesterday traded Pavel Minchikov to the Ottawa 67s for 9 picks.
9.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So there's questions within that, right? And we saw a lot of the teams out west there was 10 picks or 12 picks that one team made for
Zellweger,
for Zellweger, early picks and stuff like that. So it's really interesting. So like I wanted to talk about some of that stuff about the philosophy, and I'm not a general manager, so I'm only speaking as a player, and I kind of get the game, but I don't have that. I'm not a GM, so I can't see where it's at. But but anyways, I want to talk about how some of this goes through the good, the bad, the ugly. What maybe a GM or a coach is thinking, an organization's thinking, and then taking through a player's mindset maybe, and parents' mindset, and what was the other mindset I was thinking to talk about is just like I guess when I was a kid, when someone got traded, it seemed like, and it seems common when you talk to people that aren't really in the game. It's like, oh, how come they didn't like them? Or it seemed like it was always a negative.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily mean it's negative.
Oh yeah.
So,
I mean, well, maybe a clear example to like kind of lead you into what you want to talk about. Obviously, Windsor had the blockbuster Shane Wright trade, where same thing, they traded 8 picks and a guy or something like that. So you look at that, and if you're taking I think it's pretty clear to see why Kingston might do that. So you got
some people yes, and some people no.
Right. So I'll lay out kind of a couple of the things, and then you can take a deeper dive however you want to take it. So for Shane Wright, obviously 4th overall to Seattle, started there. They just sent him back. Just played at the World Juniors, and now he's got maybe, because how's Kingston doing this year? Are they a playoff team?
I think they're middle of the pack on the East.
So they're not going to win. They're not necessarily going to win the championship. Like, I mean, crazy things happen, but unlikely. So if you're from Kingston's perspective, okay, here we got one of the top players in the league, and he's going to be here for 2 months, and then he's gone for sure. So if I'm Kingston, it's like, okay, we're going to lose this guy. So instead of just letting him go out the door and we have nothing after that, it's like, okay, we can make this move, get a bunch of either young players or a bunch of picks to help build the team up again in a few years once he's gone. So instead of just hang on to him for the sake of hanging on to him, it's like we can make that move, and that will help our team. And then if you look at it from Shane Wright's perspective, it's like, okay, I'm here for 2 months. What do I want to do? I want to win a championship, right? And because I know I'm gone next year, I'm not going to be back. So that's where you can see that's a good example of where both parties would be happy with what's going on. It was a good situation. It wasn't necessarily a bad situation that led Kingston to say, we need to get rid of this guy. And from Shane Wright's situation, it's not, I hate Kingston, I want to leave, right? So that's just kind of one example to kind of lead you into wherever you want to go with that.
Yeah, so that was what I kind of was going to say is like, why would a team trade a player? Like obviously there's reasons, but like what makes a team trade a player? And you look at when you're taking one of your star players or someone that is a fan favorite, you hear that he's up for trade or he got traded, and you get picks. It's like on the onset, you go, well, what? That's no good. It can't be any good for us. Or they get a player that's 2 players that are different styles than the guy that you got rid of. You say, well, what are they doing? This is crazy. But at the end of the day, when you're making a trade, like it's for the team, it's like you want to make the team stronger.
Yep.
Right. Or make it stronger for the future.
Yeah.
So like
weaker to make it stronger.
Yeah. So like when you're making a trade, you're looking at, okay, how do I make my team stronger for the future and for now? So if you're not on a winning, if you're not going to win, especially in junior hockey, if you're not going to win, or if you're not in the hunt to win a championship or to go really deep in the playoffs, then you got to look at the assets that you have and say, okay, like we're going to keep this 19-year-old around for 2 months, like you said, or do we give him a chance? Like, and I got to be honest with you. I think like from a lot of the people that I've dealt with in junior hockey, they try to do the best for the kids as well. Like I know a lot of people say, no, they don't. They're just, they treat them like a piece of meat.
Yeah.
And sometimes, yeah, for sure. Sometimes, but for the most part, these people have been around the league for a long time, and they try to treat the kids good and try to give them their best, do what's right for them. So they try to make the team better, bottom line.
Yeah. For sure.
We trade him and get different assets or whatever. So do you have something to say?
Well, and just from the player perspective too, I'll probably keep trying to throw a little bit of the player perspective on it. I know you can speak to that too, but just to give a little different angle on it. I remember just playing junior also, when you're going into your last year, or you won't be back necessarily, like you want to win. So players don't want to end their career like not making the playoffs or not going deep into the playoffs, right? So I just remember that mentality with older guys that I played with, and then once I was the older guy, it's like you want to win, man. When you know you're going to be done, you want to give it a good last push to make it, and then you're off to the next thing,
but
right?
even especially if you're a last year guy and you don't have a pro contract,
Right.
you
Exactly.
try to end that off the best you can for a
Absolutely.
couple reasons, so you can win and end it on the right note, and maybe to earn one
Yeah,
to go
exactly.
deep in a playoff run.
Yeah, and that's what you see even with like just another example that going back to the team thing, for what you were saying with building for the future. Like sometimes teams will make themselves weaker to get stronger.
Yeah.
You see that with Saginaw, right? Like not
Yeah.
one of the picks they got for Minchikov was for next season, right?
Well,
it was
yeah.
2024
Yeah.
to 2025, 26. There's obviously there's more wrinkles to that because maybe they trade for other picks and
Yeah.
whatever, but or for other players. But you can see that also from the team perspective. It's like, okay, we're going to give this guy his shot, which is why you most of the time just see older guys getting traded. You don't see as much the younger guys unless it's part of a bigger deal.
Yeah, and I also believe, and I'm not 100% sure of this, my son's in the league, I probably should know this, but I do believe that I know there's a window that you can trade a first round pick. It's a small window, and it's not to disrupt their school, and they're not big fans of moving first year players. So I'm actually pretty sure that if you're a first year player, like a 17-year-old, that you'll have a hard time finding that.
Yeah.
I don't think you could trade them because of those purposes. So there's some integrity with this too, right? So that's why I think you see 18 and up.
Yeah, regardless, that's typically the dynamic you're going to see, though, right? If it's a guy that is close to done, let's give him a shot and then help build our team for the future. So we're going to take the hit for the rest of this season so that we're better in seasons coming up, and then you're giving that kid his last whack at it to try to win a championship or whatever. So I clearly remember that dynamic in my head, like when you're coming to the end, it's like you want to push to get a win. So guys don't like going out their last year not making the playoffs or whatever. So that's another reason why you don't typically see teams holding on to their top guys when it's going to be over.
If they're not making
whatever,
a big run,
right?
Yeah. So yeah, what you see like they build to gain assets, or they build for upcoming years a lot of the times. So you're either building for immediate to try to win, or you're building for upcoming years and building assets there. Like, so Ottawa's obviously done a very good job because they had a whole bunch of pick stockpiled. So that's the other thing, is you'll see a lot of these trades in juniors for so many draft picks. It's like, well, what is a draft pick in 2026 going to do for us right now? But the deal is that you have so many draft picks that you can package draft picks up and get good players. So those are just become assets. And like, I think Ottawa did a really good job with it because they had a lot of they have a good team, and they're a fairly, no, I wouldn't say young team, but middle of the pack age, like 18, a lot of 18, 19s. And they had a lot of draft picks, so they got a good team still, and they managed to get arguably the best defenseman in the CHL in Minchikov to come and play for them, and Logan Morrison, who's an overage goal scorer, without giving up a whole players. And they still got draft picks, so it's like, wow, that's a job well done.
Yeah, and one thing that I really like about if you follow the OHL, well, even the team accounts, I guess, but the OHL accounts, when they post about what the trades are, they put in brackets where the pick came from, right? Which is cool because of the 8 picks, I don't know if I think I'm thinking of the Shane Wright trade, but in brackets, if you look at the picks they traded, a lot of them weren't their picks.
Yeah,
right?
They're from
it was like
a
from
previous trade.
Another trade, right?
Yeah.
So this is one thing that people maybe don't know or aren't aware of as much, is like you feel like when you're trading picks, you're trading your team's picks. And a lot of times teams will make trades to get picks to make other trades, right? It's not just we're giving up potential future draft picks. It's that we're taking these on purpose so that we can make deals again later. You know what I mean? So it's cool to see, if you go and look at some of these accounts posting their trades, you can see where the picks came from that they put in a deal. You know what I mean? And then I was saying to you too, like, imagine being the guy keeping track of this. Yeah. You got to keep track of all these trades and all these picks and everything. Holy crap.
Good thing there's the internet.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. A lot of times as a fan, or as a team, a player on a team, you wonder why would they trade this guy when, like, we had one this year with Guelph where they traded Sasha Pastajov, who was like a top scorer on our team and played on the U.S. development team and national team, and like drafted and signed to Anaheim, and came out of nowhere. Like they traded for Max Nemestikov, and the numbers weren't like, if you looked at the numbers alone, you sit there, you go, like a lot of people were like, why? How could you get rid of Sasha? Right? And I love Sasha. The teammates loved him and all that stuff. And like, if you just looked on paper, you'd say, well, we got fleeced, right? The team got fleeced, but our general manager in Guelph knew what he was doing. If you look at it, Sasha was going to definitely been his last year, and Max has got 2 more years left, and he's a very offensive player. So, and then just the way the team was trying to be built for the next year or two, you see, so Max came in and just started potting goals, plays a really fast game, whereas Sasha played a game where it was a really slower, patient game, and he could just it was a really cerebral, crafty game. And for some guys that might be hard to play with, because it's like bang, bang, give me a puck, where he can hang on and have a little bit of patience. So you could see where, now I see where that fits in.
Well, plus they had picks too, right? Or no? Was it a 1-for-1?
I believe they got picks. I don't know. I forget. But let's say they did.
Yeah, whatever.
I think they did. But the point is like a lot of the players probably went, what's going on? We got a guy with 30 points, and we're taking a guy with 5 or 10. What's going on? But then it makes sense long term, and it makes sense.
Yeah, and I mentioned this
as a playing style, like filling positions and stuff.
Yeah, I mentioned this previously too with that specific trade, but that was an interesting one because I remember saying that I heard an interview that George did talking about that trade, and these are things that people that are just sports fans or whatever don't think about, right? So what George said with that trade specifically, I know I might be repeating myself, but whatever. He was saying that Sasha, it was likely at the time that Sasha was going to go play for Team USA in the World Juniors because he had played before, right? That didn't end up happening, but it easily could have. So now you're missing your top guy for a month, and then he's probably gone next year, right? So there's
the other thing. Yeah.
There's another situation where, similar to some of these older guys that get traded, it's like you don't expect this guy to be back. We're going to be missing him for a month, and the position Guelph was in, it's like, we need to win some games. We need to have our top guys here. So for Guelph, and then for Sasha too, it's like you're giving him a chance to go to Sarnia, who's a really strong team, and make a run possibly there, right?
Yeah.
So it's like there's another thing people don't think of from Guelph's perspective. You could sit there and be like, what the hell? Why would they get rid of this guy? But then when you actually dig into it a little bit more and hear the reasons why, now it starts to make a little bit more sense, right?
That's why some guys have jobs doing this. And some people are just fans.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing would be, why does a team trade a player? The player doesn't fit the model anymore, right? Yep. Like, you can draft a player and you think, okay, this is a player that we have and it's great, and it could be doesn't fit the coach's style. It's not the player that you thought he would be. He's not producing. He doesn't play the style that you thought he would play, and it's just not a good fit anymore for. And the team could look at it like for both. Like, maybe we're not a good fit for him. He's not a good fit for us. And then they try to give him a better place to go and make the team better as well.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I think there's that, and then there's also that. To go back to kind of, we talk about roles a lot. I've mentioned this before also. If you have too many horses that play the same way, then there can start to be some conflict with what's going on, right? So if you have 3 guys on your team and all of them like to carry the puck through the neutral zone, well, only one guy gets to have it, right? So it's like, okay, we have 3 guys that do the same job, instead of keeping all 3 where they get frustrated because maybe they don't get as much ice or they don't get as many touches as they'd like. Maybe we can move them and get a couple different role players that can fit better around the guys that can carry the play, right? You don't need 9 of the same player on your team. That's why you have roles. That's the point of roles, right? And oftentimes, if you look at top teams in the NHL, or top teams, like McDavid and Draisaitl, they don't play the same way because that would be conflicting. Back in the day, like when Chicago was unreal, like Taves and Kane don't play the same way. Crosby and Malkin, they play a more of a similar style, but they're still very different players, right? So, and that's why you won't typically see 2-3 guys that are exactly the same. So that's another fuel for moving guys or whatever.
Another thing that a lot of people maybe they think or don't think about is, sincerely from both sides, just a fresh start. because you know that there's, when someone drafts you and they sign you and stuff, they sign you because they think that you're going to be a good player, whether you're a player or a goalie, whatever, right? And the coach or the GM sees that it's there, but it's just not there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it just isn't
Like,
showing up.
I know that this kid can score 25 goals. I know that he can, and it's like, I see that he's close, and it's like there's just a little bit missing here and there, and you can see the frustration and stuff, and you're pushing for him, and you really want him to do well, but you can just see it's like not going the way that the kid needs it.
That's just not happening.
And eventually they both come to an agreement, like the general manager come to the kid and say, listen, maybe he's hard on him, maybe he's not, whatever, but at the end of the day they come to an agreement that, listen, I can move you, or the kid says, I just think I need a fresh start, and maybe the GM says, I agree with you, and you get an equivalent asset for that player. And a lot of times you see someone have the career that they were supposed to have because it maybe just wasn't the right environment for them, or as they were in that environment they're putting pressure on themselves to produce, and whatever the external things going on or internal things going on with your head games that you might play with yourself. Maybe this environment here in Windsor, Ontario is just not working for me, and then you go somewhere else and it's all of a sudden bang, good. Maybe you get off to a good game, maybe it's this the thing that you needed, and sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it's just you're not a good enough player. But a lot of times that is a thing that it's just a fresh start. You can reset the whole thing if your head's screwed on right. You can reset your whole mindset and just look as you said, manifest earlier today. Manifest what it's going to be like, and you could change in a heartbeat and have a really nice career. So like that's what I'm saying is like trades aren't necessarily negative, right?
No, the thing that came to mind was when remember when Kessel was in Toronto?
Yeah.
And then he gets shipped to Pittsburgh. After that, was it Pittsburgh right after that? I think so. Toronto to Pittsburgh. I think that was what happened.
He
to
went
Kessel.
Pittsburgh, Toronto, was it? No, Toronto, Pittsburgh. Yeah, you're right.
But it was like, yeah, it was Toronto,
Was
Pittsburgh. Yeah, yeah. So, for
Yeah,
him,
right.
because before that he was on Boston.
Yeah,
right?
you're right. Yeah, there you go.
But
one nut.
yeah. But so he's in Toronto. That's a good example of like you can see that he's got maybe some capability to be the franchise guy, and it just wasn't happening. They couldn't make the team around him. It just wasn't working for whatever reason. And then he goes to Pittsburgh, where he's not necessarily the franchise guy, but he's still obviously a huge piece of Pittsburgh. And then he has a couple of great years and wins Stanley Cup. You know what I mean? So it's like could just be need a change of scenery, whatever. Especially in like some of the Canadian market teams, you got all the media shit and whatever. And if you go to a team in the States, like they don't really care as much about hockey over there. So
yeah. Well, and
it can be a
some
lot
guys,
calmer.
like that's a good example. Taylor Hall might be another one.
Yep.
Is
Yeah, there you go.
some guys are superstars, but they're not the guy that you want to hang your hat on or you put all the pressure on. Sometimes the superstar needs to be a second line, third line fiddle, and then he'll just excel.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
For sure.
And I
For
feel
sure.
like most first round picks and arguably most first overall picks even end up being something like they need support. Like cuz there's very few of them that are like Crosby, McDavid, McKinnon that are just like they can carry the squad kind of thing. But even McKinnon arguably like he's got good support on that team, right? It wasn't
Well,
like
and it took him a couple of years.
Yeah.
He was an incredible player,
yeah,
but yeah.
most of them aren't going to. A lot of times people will think specifically about the first overall, like they're going to be the guy that turns the team around solo, like you can just hang your hat on. And there's not a lot, even first overall guys, where it's like that. You know, like you go as far back as like Nugent Hopkins, Tavares, like all these guys that were like top notch. Tavares is another good example of that. Like was one of the best or one of the top junior hockey players maybe ever in the OHL.
Well, I think where people have to really understand it, and I don't know if people actually can, like until you play. Like I've used this before. Like you could be a superstar. You mentioned does Connor Bedard's game translate, and then like I'm sure it does. Like I'm sure it does, but not today. Like and even you look at McDavid, he was like a star coming in, but he wasn't. He doesn't understand that game as an 18-year-old as like he does now, because if you think about it, like you're a really good, your first overall centerman drafted in the NHL, and then you're lined up against Patrice Bergeron. Well, that face-off, the chance of you winning that face-off is very, very slim. I'm not saying that you're not going to, but it's very, very slim because he's taken thousand. I can't. How many faceoffs? And he understands the pressure and where to put it. And he can read you like a book because he's done this thousands and thousands of times. So that first overall pick or that young guy has to learn how to get to that. It's the experience that'll get you, right. It's coming in on, what you did in junior or even the first couple of years of pro. If you're entering a zone offensively, and let's say you take whatever angle, that veteran defenseman has seen this, and he might have 10 years on you, and he's just that much bigger, stronger. But even more importantly, he's done this, and he was a first round pick, most likely if he's in the NHL himself, with 10 years experience, and he's had this zone entry hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times with guys better than you. So that this is not a shocker to him, right? So it's that experience that makes a big difference to come in. So yeah, the pressure thing is you have to learn and earn, right?
Yeah. So if you bring it back to the trade thing, that's what a lot of times, to your point about the fresh start, it's like sometimes you get these guys that maybe there was more expectation than they were capable of delivering, or there was more expectation than they were capable of delivering in that situation. And like Tavares is another good example with New York, like just couldn't get him over the top. So after whatever he was there for 5-6 years, maybe, I was like, okay, like this ain't working. We'll try to start over, because you have that one guy. If he's supposed to be your guy, you can't bring in another guy until that guy's gone. You know what I mean? So a lot of times, whether it's OHL, CHL, or the NHL, you can see that a lot, where it's just we gotta shake things up, kind of thing,
Yeah, for sure. A lot of times that a player asks to be moved because he's just not happy. And what does not happy mean? Well, a lot of times it's ice time. A lot of time it's, they just can't seem to get up the depth chart. But sometimes it's just like, and I know that a lot of people say, well, if you're not tough enough, suck it up. But a lot of kids miss home. Like a lot of kids just would rather, like if you come from where we live in Windsor, Ontario, that's the southernmost point in Canada, and you get drafted to the Sioux Greyhounds or the Sudbury Wolves or the Ottawa 67s, you're 8 to 10 hours away. And maybe just playing in London or Sarnia or Saginaw, or Guelph, where you're 2-3 hours away, makes all the difference. Where you can see your mom once in a while, see your mom and dad once in a while, your brothers, and if you get to go home, you get 2 days off, and the team says you can go home for a day, you can actually do it. Like that could be a thing. And then sometimes a team will trade a kid just because when you have that issue where you're gone, mentally gone, you can't perform anyway. So if a team recognizes that, that's another reason why they say, yeah, we'll make you happy if you can, if we get the right assets and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, there's a human element to trades too that people don't see. I know maybe we're going to talk about this a little bit after, but just maybe to mention it now, like people don't think about some of those other circumstances sometimes, especially if you're if you're a fan, if you're just a fan and you watch the games, you forget about like the people that are behind it. You know what I mean? It's not just like there's a lot of life circumstances. Most of your time is spent away from the rink and away from the gym. And there's a lot of other things going on that people don't necessarily see. So if you have, you live in a place where you have a whole lot of really close friends, and then you got to move, or if you're playing pro and you have a wife and kids at a house, and then you get moved across the country, it's like these are things that people don't necessarily see, and they don't know what it feels like, right? So it's easy to, have your judgments about the value of a trade or the reasons for a trade or whatever. And sometimes you'll see a trade happen where it looks like a team did get the lower end of the deal, and it might just be that they had no choice. Like this kid just said, I can't play here. Like I can't do it anymore. And they have to get this kid out of here. They have to do something to get him out of here.
There's a mental state that is just not, he's not in a good mental state now. He can't perform. He misses home so much. He hates the city. I mean, that could happen.
Well, dude, and I remember that for me, like I'm really tight with my family, and because I have that, getting away from them is hard because like I want to see them. I want to hang out with them. We're tight. And I remember when I got traded, it was 3 hours away, but it was like, I'm completely out of my circle. I'm completely out of my friend circle. I'm completely out of my family circle. All those connections are weakened or gone. And most of them for the friend circle, most of them are gone. Like just overnight, it was like gone. Connections gone, not talking to people anymore, going to a new place where you don't know anyone and you don't have any social connections at all. And for somebody that like me, the type of person that I am, I wanted to be close with my family. So that's hard. And other guys, it's not like that. Other guys, it's like they're happy to move to Sudbury and be like, I never have to see my family. Awesome. You know what I
Yep,
mean? So
yep. Or they could
there's
just park it and say, "I'm here for hockey," and they could just do it. Like,
yeah,
and it's cool.
right,
It's not everybody's built the same way.
exactly.
It
So
doesn't make anyone good or bad.
yeah, so there's
Does it? Yeah.
those human elements, personalities that you got to deal with, right?
When I got traded from Sudbury to Hamilton, I was very excited. It was great. So I got to Hamilton, and the first house I went to, and I'm not saying this is negative, not their problem. So this is a funny story actually. So I'm fired up. We had a game that night. We were playing against Peterborough. So I got in mid-afternoon, and one of the guys, actually John Koppel, he listens to this all the time. So hi John. Anyway, so he picked me up, but before he picked me up, so I was getting changed, and as I got in the house, there's two cats. I'm like, oh no, I can't. My eyes will well up like I'm allergic to cats, like nobody's business, like that. I get snot face, furnace face, red eyes. Can't do a cat's. So, anyways, okay, no big deal. And then the lady, Linda was her name. She goes, "Oh, Andy, dinner's ready." And good thing I didn't say I was starving. So I went up the stairs, and it's not good or bad. I just never seen this before. So I walked upstairs. I looked at the table. I went, "What is that?" Like I didn't say it out loud, but like it looked like a cat puked in a casserole dish. I've never had a casserole. Our house, we never had casseroles. I didn't know what casseroles were. So it turned out to be tuna casserole, but it looked like the cat went and puked in a bucket. So I said, "Oh no, it looks great." 17, right? Looks great. I said, "But you know what? I ate on the way here. I actually be too full." "Oh, okay, great." So I went to the game and went to the rink, had a hot dog or something like that. Then played the game, came back, and then we went on a road for a couple of days, and then came back, and it was Sunday morning. So we got back late. I think we came back from Belleville or something. Came back late in the morning, probably 2, 3 in the morning. And so 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning, Andy, time to get up. And I said, "Oh, no. We got the day off today. I'm going to sleep for a little bit." She goes, "No, it's time for church." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I don't do that either." So fortunately, went to the rink, called, "Okay, coach, just to let you know, I'm allergic to cats. Like, you look at my eyes, look at my face." And that's what I use. He said, "Oh yeah, no problem. We'll get you another place." And I went to this Brian and Janice. They had a 2-year-old kid, and it was like the perfect place. I'm not. So the thing was, they're not bad people for having cats, and they're not bad people for not cooking the way I like it when I move into their house. But it's an issue, and there's some kids that would go to that situation and say, "Okay, I can't say anything. The coach will kill me," and then you just become unhappy, sick, eating tuna casserole that you don't know is actually food, but it's actually probably not bad. All that stuff is not a good fit, right? So that could wear on you, and it's like when you're 17, sometimes it's hard. You know, can I just go in the fridge? Like I can just go in your fridge and just take whatever I want because I live here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember I went so on Friday I went to see my billets when I lived away, and hadn't seen him since before the COVIDs. So I hadn't seen him for a few years, and I just like having the flashbacks, like going into my old bedroom and remembering what it was like being in there. So for different personalities, man, it's hard to deal with. Like there's a lot of things outside of just the playing part that people don't think about, and it can be, especially when you're in those critical development years, when you're 16 to 20, whatever, like those are huge years, man. And if you're in a situation that's not necessarily the best, it can wear on you, man. So that's just another reason where things can go off the rails, right?
Yeah, 100%. So just a couple other reasons. These ones might be just maybe more on the negative side from a team but it's just the reality is sometimes a team gives up on a player. They watch, they've been somewhat patient, and they just go, "You just don't have it what it takes. We're gonna have to get rid of you." And that's that's that. Sometimes it's the kid's an asshole. You can have a badass kid, late for everything, a bad attitude, not good in the dressing room. It's time to get rid of this kid. That happens, and that's not the team's fault necessarily. How do you blame them, right? And then sometimes they'll trade a kid because he is a good player. This is actually a very common one. You are a good player. You're a really good player, and our team's really deep. And we want you to succeed, but you're not. Right now, you can't beat out this guy, and this guy, and this guy. So
yeah, that's another
muck
one.
It out. I'm going to do you a favor, Eric, and the Oshawa Generals are very interested in you, and I'm going to do you a favor. And from what I can see, if you go to Oshawa, and based on what they tell me, you're going to probably play on the third or second line, and you're going to flourish, and you're going to get an opportunity that you need.
Yeah, for sure,
man. And that's a nice thing from a coach or a team standpoint to do something like that.
Yeah, the opportunity thing is a huge one too, because I was talking to a kid last week who's having an awesome year where he's at right now, and now teams are getting interested, right? So he was talking to me, he's got this opportunity, this opportunity, this opportunity, and then a couple teams in his league now have been asking their team about trading for him and whatever. So we were talking, and he was asking me what I think about possibly doing this, possibly doing that. And where he's at right now, he's getting the best opportunity that he's going to get, right? So I said to him, I wouldn't fix something that's not broken necessarily. Where you're at right now, is it like he could move on to a higher level, and that eventually needs to happen? But for the time being, it's like you're in a really good situation. Why would you want to change that up? And for teams that are asking to trade for this kid, it would be like, okay, unless they're going to guarantee you, which how can they do that? But unless they can really make a case that you're going to be their top guy or in the same role you're in now with your team, then why would you do that? Why would you lose the opportunity or go to a better team and get less? You know what I mean? And that's the flip side of that trade situation, right? Where it's like, if you want to go somewhere to get some more opportunity, that can be huge, because if you get lost in the depth chart, you could be a really good player, but if you never get the opportunity, that's the biggest thing with, if you want to jump to the next levels, you have to play. You have to get the opportunity to be a go-to guy and to be a guy that can change the game. And if you don't get that opportunity, it's really easy to get drowned out, because there's so many guys that are going to be looked at first because they are the go-to guy. So if you can make a trade where now you'll go from the third line right winger to the second line right winger and power play time. So that totally changes your whole game. Like you're going from 12 minutes a night to 17, 18 minutes a night, right? Which is huge. That's way different.
Yeah,
you know
100%.
What I mean?
Yeah, so I wanted to say, like, why would another side of it. Why would a player want to get traded? So a lot of times people don't think that maybe the player asked.
Yep.
Right. So it's not always the teams are a bunch of assholes. Sometimes
Yeah.
players ask for it, right?
Yeah.
So why do players ask for trades? Typically, the number one thing, what would you think it is?
Opportunity,
Opportunity, and ice time.
Yeah.
And so, but here's a tricky thing, right? This is where kids or players have to be, like what I always say is, don't overestimate how good you are, and don't underestimate how good everybody else is, because you could request a trade thinking that, for lack of a better term, the grass is greener on the other side, but that's not necessarily the case. You actually don't know. Like you better have a really, really, really good idea of what situation you're in currently, and you have to have a really good idea of what type of player you actually are. So for someone to even want you, right, if you're not getting a ton of ice time, what would make you think that someone is really that attracted to make a trade for you, number one? And then if you do that, and you don't have a general manager or a coach that can communicate well with you and say, oh yeah, you want out of here, you're out of here, instead of sitting down and say, okay, like, I want to explain something to you. Okay, you're a third line center. Yeah, you're not on the power play. Yeah, you might not get this, but like you're valuable. You're doing this. Stick to it. If they don't have that, or and then explain to them, if we trade you, it might not be a better situation. It could be worse. It could be much worse. Your billet house might not be as good. You might think you're going there to be on the second line or the third line or on a power play, but that might not be the case. You might not be as good as you think you are, and you might have to, or you might even go there and have to start from the bottom again, and you might not be getting the ice that you're currently getting here. You might go to this team and the general manager trades for you, but the coach looks at you as one look at you and he goes, I don't like him, and you don't get that opportunity. So you got to be careful, if when you want out, that you didn't solve problems first. So having said that, if you're in a situation where for good reasons that you want to get traded, well, before I go into that, this is why it's very important as a player to not only be a player on your team that is not tradable, right? Like, so what I mean by that is that you play so well that the team would never want to get rid of you. They still can, or there could be reasons why they would, but you play so that they're like, this kid is like, this is untouchable. And you play that way so that you can be tradable, so that you are a commodity for other people if it ever comes up to that way, so that you make the best of both worlds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I remember that exactly what you just said was pretty much the situation for me when I got traded. So what happened was that when I was playing junior, I was in that situation where I was like one of the top players in the league at the time, and the team that I was on didn't want to trade me, and just because of like the team circumstances that were going on, it wasn't a good situation outside of the on ice play. Like it was all the extra stuff around that was an environment that I didn't feel like I had a choice. I feel like I had to go. And then the team I got traded to, it was a better situation surrounding the team, but it was a worse situation in terms of the playing, right? So I went there expecting I'm going to hop right in and be right back to where I was, and like the coach had other plans, and I that was something I wasn't aware of. It wasn't communicated to me. Obviously, I wasn't prepared for that. So here I am thinking I'm going to jump in there and it's going to be a better situation, and it was quite the opposite. Like the team situation was better with the team that I went to, and that I was thankful for that because the team that I came from was an absolute disaster. But in terms of the on ice play, it was not a better situation at all. So I was hoping for something different, and then I got smacked in the face with the reality that, hey, man, it's not just going to be better because you want it to be. And that's something that you have to be prepared for if you're in that situation as a player. Because a lot of guys, when they start to play junior, it's real easy to say, well, I'm just going to get traded because things aren't going your way, right? It's a very common attitude where something's not shaking the way you want it to shake. And whatever the reason is, you're just like, I want out of here.
Yeah,
and then
it's easy for the teams to say that too. We'll just trade these guys, and it's like, you know, it's I'm a big firm believer that solve your own problems first. So like, because I got a couple guys that played U.S. college too, and they switched schools. It turned out that it wasn't any better anywhere else. Like so what was the problem? And that's what you have to ask a lot of the times. What is the problem? So sometimes you're just on a team where you're never going to get a shot, or you're not their guy. Okay, I get that, but you have to look inside and and say, okay, like I'm not playing the way I could play. Is it the coach's fault? Is it the team's fault? Like, because maybe it is, but what can I do to make it better? And we've talked about this several times. So the first thing you have to do is you got to look inside and say, okay, where do I need to be better? Have I finished hits? Am I scoring goals? I'm supposed to score goals. Am I scoring goals? Am I making plays? Or when I make a play, does it end with me? Am I in the gym? Am I showing the team that I want to be here? And all these different things. So and then you got to give that an honest shot to fix. Have I talked to the coach? I said, Coach, I'm not sitting here bitching, but obviously as a hockey player, I want to move up in the lineup. I want to have an opportunity somewhere else. What is it that I'm missing? What is it that I can do better? And not just for words, but to actually get some feedback from your coach. And when you get that feedback, do it right to the best of your ability. And if you take care of your own self to make the team better, and that's another thing. Are you doing it to make the team better or you better? Because that's an important thing too, right? So when you look at all these things and you put an honest effort into making yourself better and it still doesn't change, okay, maybe a change of scenery will be better. But until you do that, you'll never know. Because if you bring your same self somewhere else and your same self hasn't been your best self, then that's probably not going to change a whole lot of things.
absolutely, man. I'm clear as day. Clear as day. Remember this exact thing you're talking about? Like this was my whole mentality. So I was on a team where I was the go-to guy because it was a weaker team. And on any team I could have been a go-to guy, but in my first situation it came easy. Like I could cut corners. Like I could do things that weren't necessarily best for the team, but I was just better than everybody on the team. So it was me and one other guy as forwards on my my first junior team that we were the guys that ran it for the last stretch that I was there. So I could get away with those being more selfish because there was nobody to take my spot, right? But then when I went to this other team, it was much more of a battle. And although there was a lot of circumstances that I didn't have control over, that had the adults that were in charge behaved the way that I think they should now, looking back at it, it would have been much better for me. But for me personally, I didn't do some of that stuff. Like I didn't think, have I done every single thing I can to make this situation better? And I know for a fact, looking back, I did not. You know, there was a lot
It's
of
the
the
hardest thing to do, right?
like taking the ownership, man. It's so hard, man.
The hardest thing to do is to sit there and say, I'm not good enough, or I'm not working hard enough, or it's my fault. That's the hardest thing to do.
So hard, man.
It's just easier to blame other people or say, I'm better than that guy, but he's getting the opportunities. The coach doesn't like me. I'd be better off somewhere else. Just the easiest thing to do. The hardest thing to do is to dig deep, to actually dig deep, and say, this is where you're falling short and you need to be better. Because if you watch enough video, if you actually sat there and watched video of yourself, like unbiasedly or maybe even critically, you'll find some stuff.
For
Huge.
sure, man.
Huge.
For sure. I can think of
Huge.
all the things right now for myself, like going back that I could have done different or done better. And man, I would absolutely die to have this perspective when I was playing junior. Like it would have just been so beneficial to have, or to have someone explain to me. You know, that's the other thing. And that's kind of what I mean when I say that it would have been nice if the adults were more like the adults and how they communicated with the team. But that's not, you don't get that all the time, right? And so to be able to take the ownership and say, hey, like, have I actually done everything I can do to make the situation better before you go say, hey, I want to jump ship to go to the next place? Because if on some level you're part of the problem, you're bringing the problem. You know what I mean? It's not just going to be the problem goes away because you think that it's somebody else, right? So that's why it's important that you're careful about what you're asking for, right? If you haven't done the analysis and really tried to solve your own problem to the best of your ability first, then you're just the problem's gonna follow you because it's attached to you to some degree, right?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, you have to remember that this is not being disrespectful to coaches. This is just reality. Like if you play 4 years in the OHL, NHL, college. Well, college is a little bit different. They have a little bit more stability, it seems. But if you play 4 years in one spot, you're probably going to be there longer than the coach, anyways. So if you have an issue with the coach, that you're probably going to outlast him. Actually, Adam said that when he did a podcast with us when he was playing in Chicago. Keenan was bagging the shit out of them, and he was just getting frustrated. And he said Steve Smith grabbed him and said, "Just don't worry about it. You'll be here longer than this guy." And it's funny when you get that perspective, right? So sometimes you got to just plug through things. If you do your thing long enough, like with all seriousness and hard work and fixing problems and fixing your deficiencies and just trying to make yourself a better player and practicing hard and doing all the right things. Normally, if you have that base skill to be there, things will work out.
I know.
You know,
it's really one of the hardest things, man. Like I remember but that's why when we talk to our guys now that are here training, I try so hard to explain this type of perspective to them. Like all the cliche things we say, control the controllables, make sure you talk to your coach, take as much ownership as you can. But it's so hard to do. Like I remember it's so hard to do as the kid. And maybe had I had a resource of someone giving me this information, it would have made it easier and it would have been helpful. And that's what I'm hoping when I'm trying to communicate it to our guys. But it is like, I don't know why that maturity, like having the maturity to be able to do that when you're in those years, it just doesn't happen a lot. And so hopefully like hearing the information, being exposed to it when you're in those years, the 16 to 20, when it's this type of situation is possible, maybe that's something that will better equip the kids to deal with the situation. Because man, it would have been so helpful to have that like level-headedness or the maturity to be able to self-analyze.
Well, that's the thing.
Whatever,
you have
right?
to have the maturity to listen to it, right?
Yeah.
And I look at, I know I talk to my son or other kids too, but just my son's my son, right? So sometimes I'll talk to him and there's a huge message that I'm giving him. Not to be hockey dad, just like there's a huge message there, and it's like, yeah, dad.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard to grab on.
And then he circles back. He's like, yeah, dad. Yeah.
Yeah. Once it's his idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But
right?
like, hey, he just turned 17.
I know that's
He
part of
turned 17, man. I don't expect him to be running for president here or anything.
Yeah.
He's an intelligent kid.
Yeah.
But like, there's only so much that brain can absorb, right?
Yeah.
And understand, like as mature as he can be.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, So yeah, there's as much as you are willing to, and at that age, is as much as you're willing to admit that you need help with, right? So
yeah, that's a hard thing for sure.
So, what's good about trades? Well, it can benefit a player because, as well as a team. That's a good thing. You know, you come to a mutual agreement with your team. It could be everything. It could be good up until this point, and you have a conversation with your general manager, and he says, "Listen, we have an opportunity. We thank you for everything that you've done for this organization so far. We can move you to a team. It would help our team moving forward. You know, whatever the circumstances are. And I think this will be a good fit for you. You can look at each other and say, "Yep, okay." Eric, thank you. I appreciate it. Now go there, and both parties are happy. So that's a good thing. It doesn't have to be a bad breakup, right?
Yep.
It's a positive. Obviously, it could be a new energy, new start for both, right? But for the player as well, it could be a brand new energy, brand new start. That's all good. What you have to remember when you get traded, though, if you were in a trade market, is the positive side that you have to look at is someone wants you. Right? It's not just that someone's getting rid of you. A lot of people look at it that way, but there's a team that's sitting there go, yeah, Eric, we want you to come to our team. That's a positive. And it's what you do with that opportunity is up to you. If someone wants you, that's a good thing. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, and that team trading for you might have a better role for you. It might even suit you better. So it might be the best thing that ever happened to you. And then just obviously the negatives, like I said earlier, is sometimes the grass isn't always greener on the other side. So if you initiate a trade and, you go to somewhere where you think it's just going to be great, sometimes it's not going to be as good as you thought it was going to be. Again, billets, that could be a thing where you live, the coaches, all those different things. You might overestimate how good you are. And you might overestimate or underestimate how good you had it somewhere. Right? Like your billets, that's another thing. You could have a great place and then go somewhere. It's like the whole city, like everything about it's like, oh God, I don't like this. Right? Traveling around, people forget. And then the negative too is that you form a group of buddies when you're on a team, and that's the hard part is leaving your group of buddies that you battled with and just hung out with and became very good friends, and those real critical points of your life.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Yeah.
I think maybe the last thing, just to leave something with the adults. So if you're a mom or dad in a situation where your kid might get traded, is thinking about getting traded, is thinking about asking for a trade, or they end up actually getting traded, it's over. What maybe some perspective as a parent in that situation? Maybe like obviously it depends on what the circumstances specifically, but kind of just some things for parents to think about maybe for the trade. And from the kid's perspective, like what they might be going through or how you can be supportive in that situation.
I think parents have to be the adults. Like, again, we go back to solving problems, and like the easiest thing, like that's what I mean. Like kids will be a reflection of the parents a lot of the times. So when things go sour or things aren't going exactly the way they want it to go, and they talk about getting traded, get me out of here, that kind of is a reflection of the parents a lot of the times, because a good parent, I guess, I'm just thinking it, I don't know how else to say that, but a good parent that has a good perspective on their kid. Like if Charlie was to say to me, Dad, I want out of here, I don't say, okay, let's get you out of here. You're not happy? That's not the conversation we would ever have.
Right.
And to say that conversation has never taken place, I'd be lying, because every kid does it because you want it to go perfect for yourself. So every kid sits there, like, so I'm talking as an adult, right? Every kid is looking at, I want to be on the first line. I want to be on the power play. I want to be on the penalty kill. I want the coach to like me. I want. When you don't get exactly what you want, you think you can get it somewhere else. So your job as a parent is to be able to look and say, okay, so you're having a little poopy pants here today, right? You didn't get the shifts that you needed, whatever. Like, and then, so your job as a parent is to explain what the best you can, what they're going through. And you don't have to be a hockey player to understand this. You have to have some, like, life is life, right? Like you always said, you don't walk into a company and start off as a CFO. You start off and you work your way up. So like that common sense can go to hockey, whether you play the game or not. So, okay, son, so you're having a bad day. What is it? Okay, so did you talk to the coach? Have you talked to the coach? Have you done this? You go through all the problem solving things and say, explain that the grass isn't going to be greener somewhere else necessarily. And, explain that there is a battle and a struggle and it's good for you. And to keep working and fight through and go through your problems. So that's number one. That's what I would do first. Okay. If it gets to the point where the team, like they're talking to you as an adult, and or the inevitable is going to happen, or it's a serious conversation that it's best for both parties that we move your son. Okay, now as an adult, you look at it and say, okay, this is the reality now. Why is it better? How can it be better? How do we deal with this? How do I deal with my kids' emotions? And you talk them off the ledge. So number one, and I would be very guilty of this. First of all, I'd say, okay, right? I'm just being honest. They said we're looking at trading your son. I'd say, okay, not here, not here, not here, not here, not here, not here. As an adult, because number one, I don't want him to live 8 hours away. If I could control that, I want him to be in a situation where I feel they're good, like very, very well run teams, right? That's from the adult. But what does he want?
To play.
Wants to play, and maybe what you want as an adult isn't exactly what they want. So it's a discussion with them, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to go to one of the teams that's maybe like Northern Ontario, where you're 8-9 hours away from home? Is that what you want? Because if that's what he wants and he thinks he can excel and he's making a decision, then who am I to say no, that's not a good idea, and discourage that, right? So it's discussing what he wants and just taking him through having the proper attitude towards this.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, that's the most important thing. And then just your due diligence of just having adult conversations with your current team and GM and all that kind of stuff, like adult and thankfulness and all the respect that they deserve. And then when you go to your new team, go there, if you get traded, go in there with the right attitude that you're going to work and you're not anything special. And, it's just the same thing over and over. But making your son aware that, okay, you're going to have new billets, you're going to have new issues and all that stuff. You just want to make your son's transition as easy as possible from that he can just concentrate on the hockey part and with a good attitude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure, man. Awesome advice.
I don't know if that was a good sentence or not, but
no, it's good because parents don't know, man. If you haven't been in that situation or you haven't been traded before, you've never played any kind of sport at a level where these kind of things happen, it can be hard to know. Like, so like we talk about it and it sounds like, yeah, obviously you're going to run through the checklist, but like people don't even know what the checklist is, right? So it's important to.
But initially, what happens a lot of times as parents, it's like it's freak show right away.
Oh yeah.
Like if you look at it through youth hockey and you look at it through all the way up, when one thing doesn't go right, it's all negative and it's a freak show. Missed a shift. I've talked to parents and a kid misses one shift and dad's like, what the hell's going on here? Well, it's one shift. There's a thousand reasons why he might have missed one shift. Maybe he's got to get a skate blade changed. Don't freak out. So, like, if the coach yells at your kid, all these things, don't freak. There's the reasons. And I think that's the number one thing for parents is don't freak out. Have a rational conversation and don't take your kids' emotions and make it worse, because I definitely would have the ability if my son was emotional about something, either way, good or bad, to turn it up about 10 notches. The point would be is if your son was having that attitude, is to say, okay, then and find how to make it better. Coach has a lot of decisions to make, not just about you, right?
Yeah, for sure. Man, make me real thankful for my parents because they were exactly that all the time. My dad and my mom both. It was always like, okay, let's like take a step back, talk about what's going on, figure out what the best decision we can make with the information we have at the time and all that. They were great with that. They never ever did the gas on the fire deal ever.
Good. You're lucky.
So really lucky, because then when it came down to it and then we had to make a critical decision, I can now look back on it and feel like no regret about any decision I made because it was the best I could make at the time. I couldn't have done better. If I went back, I would have made the same decision again because that was the one to make at the time, because we took the time to actually do the problem solving steps, right? So it's important as parents because it's really easy to fly off the rails. I don't have kids, so I don't know what it's like to look at your kid in a tough situation or whatever, but I can imagine, and having been a kid in a tough situation, I can imagine from the parent perspective that real easy to fly off the handle like you're talking about. So.
Yeah, but as a parent too, is just don't also remember, it's like the school teacher calls and says, Johnny got, I'm gonna use Eric instead. Eric got in trouble at school today. A lot of parents will make excuses for the kids before it starts, where your kid could be the asshole. It's the same with when they're away from home and they're playing in these situations, and you get one perspective, and that's your kids. And you might say, you're working hard, right? You working hard? Yeah, I'm in the gym every day. Okay, that's good. Are you though? Are you actually there? Number one. Number two, when you're there, are you actually working hard, and is there a purpose? Like, are you actually doing the work? Is it productive, and are you just there because you have to be? Like, there's a difference between doing it well to the best of your ability and actually being focused and just saying you're being there. So like a lot of times parents freak out and defend their kid before their kid needs to be defended.
Yeah.
Maybe the onus is on their kid, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
good perspective for mom and dad. That's a good place to stop. So
okay,
let's stop there.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.